I'll fix our economy.
I'll get up every day determined to make our economy work.
When I was younger, I believed that politicians could make an economy work better for people.
I'll bring back our jobs and I'll bring back our money.
But eventually I noticed that when politicians try to improve our economy, they always make some things worse.
The worst financial crisis in the U.S. since the Great Depression.
20 years ago, politicians from both parties helped create the Great Recession by encouraging banks to give more people mortgages so more people could achieve the American dream.
Owning a home is a part of that dream.
They had government-backed companies buy people's mortgages, so lenders suddenly approved more mortgages. They would have been more careful had their own money been on the line.
Borrowers often had sketchy credit, were financially strapped, or lacked sufficient income to qualify for a standard mortgage.
When enough people stopped paying their mortgages, the housing bubble popped.
Banks collapsed, the economy plummeted, and the Great Recession had officially begun.
Then President Obama made things worse with his plan to stimulate the economy with
shovel-ready projects all across the country.
But this being government, that plan wasted even more money.
Shovel-ready was not as shovel-ready as we expected.
They laugh, but they'd spent $800 billion of your money. It's just another example of what economists Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises wrote about. The conceit behind the idea that politicians can guide the economy better than letting free enterprise rule.
The free market, which alone have made the present level of wealth possible.
The free market alone allowed average Europeans and Americans to live better than kings once had. But because some people were much less well off than others, socialist intellectuals said government needs to organize the economy. And many in media believed, some even claimed, that Soviet 5-year plans were a big success. Hayek and Mises were among the few voices saying, this is going to collapse.
Socialism assumes that all the available knowledge can be used by a single central authority. It overlooks that we can achieve that great utilization of available resources only because we utilize the knowledge of millions of men.
Mises and Hayek were right, of course.
Another piece of the past fell today in Berlin.
The Soviet Union fell. Mises rebelled against socialism. I thought we won that war, but it's back.
The Soviet Union collapsed because its economy failed, because they could not centrally plan the economy.
Ryan McMaken of the Mises Institute.
Eventually, the economy simply couldn't function at all without some foundation in a market economy.
Every country that's tried socialism, everywhere in the world, has failed.
You cannot plan an economy.
Because no political leader can ever know as much as the millions of individuals doing their own thing.
That's exactly right. And that's the idea that Mises introduced to the world. It's one of his great innovations, was central planning doesn't work because everybody out there has different ideas for themselves, wants to do different things with their property. And if you take away their ability to do what they want, it eventually causes great impoverishment and maybe even total economic collapse. And now we've got politicians talking about we need more socialism, we need more communism, we need more government ownership of everything.
We need a socialist New York because the market cannot be what determines the distribution of dignity.
Not just in New York.
A socialist newcomer will be Seattle's next mayor.
We don't have to look any further than Mises to find an excellent explanation of why that doesn't work. Economics isn't this like academic exercise. It's a way to understand the way that people are exploited by the people in power.
Exploited how?
Through inflation, through taxation, through regulation, through all of those things that prevent people using their property and wealth in a way that actually makes them better off. And instead, government takes its cut, and government prevents people from doing things that people would have done because that's what would have made those people happier, wealthier, and better off. And they want central planning because they think that the people in power can determine for themselves how you should spend your money, what you should do with your wealth, what the money supply should be. They do all of that. And Hayek and Mises before him help us understand how that process works in making us poorer and worse off.
Many people would agree that socialism is half right. I'm convinced it's all wrong.
Hayek called it a fatal conceit, the idea that we smart people, we can manage the economy.
It just comes back to the fundamental problem that you would have with even more hardcore socialist systems.
You're the Mises Institute. Why do you keep citing Hayek?
He was a student of Ludwig von Mises. We carry many of his books. And he's carrying on really Mises' legacy in terms of economic theory.
My aim is to make politically possible what in the present state of opinion is not politically possible.
I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
McMaken describes today's passion for socialist planning as
something that's halfway between Soviet-style communism and free markets. But in the end, it's all just the same thing. It's all about giving bureaucrats the power to decide for private people in the private economy what they can do with their property.
In giving away liberty as the price to be paid for the acquisition of prosperity, the Russians made a poor bargain. They now have neither the one nor the other.
Once you take away people's ability to control private property, you end up with economic collapse. You end up also with a despotic government that controls everything. Because once you have government control of the economic system, fundamentally the government controls everything. Because if they control your property, they can also end up controlling every other aspect of your life as well.
While Mises and Hayek pointed out that central planning wouldn't work, economist John Maynard Keynes got more attention, saying it would, saying government should do more. This rap video illustrates how people once revered Keynes, but dismissed Hayek.
Lord Keynes, welcome. Your agenda.
That won't be necessary. I am the agenda. Tell them I've arrived.
And then tell them I've arrived.
And your name is?
Hayek?
While Hayek was largely ignored, Keynes influenced government policy. He persuaded politicians to stop backing currencies with gold.
There's no danger of a serious rise in the cost of living.
This belief in economic circles that you can manage the economy perfectly without ever having runaway inflation, that you can decide just what are the right interest rates, what is the right amount of money you create.
You meaning government.
Yes, government and the central bank. This belief that that could all be very well managed and not lead to any significant downside. And also that government money, that is fiat money, money backed by nothing, had no real significant cost to regular people.
But it clearly does, as we should have learned in the 1970s, when government sparked inflation by spending a lot while keeping interest rates low.
In the late 70s, as inflation started to really accelerate and people really started to feel it.
15% at one point.
Yes, right?
Gasoline prices had more than doubled. Mortgage rates pushed 20%. Unemployment kept on rising.
Not to mention interest rates for borrowing money really impacted farmers and small business people, especially, who could borrow only at these very high rates.
Debts piled up. U.S. farmers had no way to pay back their creditors.
People then saw that, oh, everything we've been told for the last 30 years about managing the economy isn't really true. Keynesian-style economics had created all of these bubbles, and the only way to get out of those is through a real correction in prices, by letting all those financial bubbles pop.
As the recession deepened through 1982, its effects were felt across America. Farmers were driven off their land by high interest rates. Thousands of businesses failed.
Boom and bust.
Mises' fundamental contribution is in the fact that when you start to inflate the money supply, as we do all the time, it sows the seeds for a future economic collapse. And that is the cause of everything we've seen over the last century. It is Mises' work that explains why did the Great Depression happen? Why did the mass inflation of the 70s happen? Why did the inflation of 2022 happen? All of these are explained if we look at the boom-bust cycle theories of Mises.
We've been going back and forth for a century. I want to steer markets. I want them set free.
How do you avoid creating these financial bubbles? How do you avoid the inflation that impoverishes people? A lot of it comes back to the money. And a lot of people, right, they do not find monetary economics to be very interesting.
No, it's not.
But if you want to understand how inflation is making your life harder and how it's making government have more control over your life, The explanation is there, and Mises helped provide that, and that's filtered down. And I think that's why you see a lot of skepticism about government control of money today, why you see a flight to things like Bitcoin and gold.
The price of gold setting another record.
We can't trust government currency.
People know that government control of the money is a big problem, and also people understanding that there is some connection between government and inflation.
McMaken says our government made things worse when it stopped backing the dollar with gold.
FDR, through executive order, destroyed the gold standard. That's just by the stroke of a pen, impoverished many Americans, stole Americans' gold.
Once the dollar was no longer tied to gold, its value declined as politicians kept printing more dollars.
And that's what Hayek helps us understand, is why does that happen? Why can't you just inflate the money supply and expect everything to be fine? Why does it lead to inflation and recessions and all of these bad things? And if we want to understand how that's making us poorer and ripping us off, we have to study the economic side of things. Because if we don't know any economics, we can't see the ways that the state is ripping us off in 10 different ways.
Explain how government printing money steals from people.
It's destroying your purchasing power every time the government creates more dollars. The inflation tax is this hidden tax which allows the government to spend more without actually raising explicit tax rates. But the end effect on you is that you have less purchasing power, you can buy fewer things, and now you've been effectively taxed. So you hold a dollar in your hand, and then if suddenly the government prints up a bunch of new dollars, the government is acting just as a counterfeiter. It's creating money for the same reason that a counterfeiter creates money, so that they can spend it. The government prints new money, so now where there used to be $1, there are now, say, $2. What does that mean for the value of the $1 you held the day before they created the new money? It means it has less value. Because when there's more of something, each individual unit of that thing has less value.
There should be zero inflation?
Well, the Fed has this 2% inflation goal.
2%.
2% inflation target.
2%.
It should be zero. And in fact, keep in mind that in a truly free economy, inflation is probably negative. Prices are probably going down in a truly free economy, just like you see prices on TVs and microwaves go down all the time. In an economy that's progressing and becoming more technologically advanced, prices should go down. The goal inflation rate is 0%. That is written into US law. And yet the Fed has invented this 2% price inflation goal. So of course it should be at most zero, but in a truly free economy, it actually is probably negative if you have a well-functioning economy.
Not according to the Federal Reserve.
Promote progress toward both our maximum employment and 2% inflation goals.
This is a small cadre of people at the very center determining what interest rates should be. That's just central planning.
There should be no Federal Reserve System!
Ron Paul ran on End the Fed, and that became popular among libertarians. It's gone nowhere.
What Ron Paul understood was that America's greatest periods in terms of economic growth and a rising standard of living was when there was no central bank. The greatest gains in the standard of living in America was during a period of deflation. This was in the latter part of the 19th century. And there was no central bank. There was no fiat currency that the government could just create. And that is a period of some of the biggest gains we ever saw in terms of creating a larger and more flourishing middle class in America. What's happened since the central bank was created? We had the Great Depression.
For more of my content, go to johnstossel.com. I post a new short video every Tuesday. That's at johnstossel.com.
Soup kitchens and bread lines became as commonplace as the flappers and speakeasies of the Roaring '20s.
The decades that followed brought more problems.
We had the inflation of the 70s. We had, of course, the Great Recession. We had the global financial crisis, and then we had the 40-year highs in inflation in recent years. That's all happened on the Federal Reserve's watch. The Fed does not deserve this reputation it's managed to get as someone who has smoothed over all of the economic problems of the last century. That simply hasn't happened. Some of the worst economic crises we've had have been on the Fed's watch, and Ron could see that.
My position on central economic planning is I don't like it.
I think a lot of the reason that people also flocked to Ron on that issue is that they could see what a secretive organization the Fed was, and that it was functioning largely without any real oversight.
We in the Federal Reserve System acted vigorously to adjust monetary policy.
People treated Greenspan like he was some sort of a god. I was in school at the time, and no one criticized Greenspan.
Chairman Greenspan has guided the Federal Reserve with a rare combination of technical expertise, sophisticated analysis, and old-fashioned common sense.
He was the most amazing economist in history, it seemed, at the time. Thanks to Ron, though, people have started to question the central bank. People have started to wonder, is everything they do gospel? And it was only after Ron's criticisms of the Fed that the Fed suddenly decided it needed to have regular press conferences so we could talk about its policy and start to talk about why they were raising or lowering the target interest rate.
The Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy rate unchanged.
The Fed started making videos that claim
the Fed performs a number of important functions, all with the ultimate goal of promoting a healthy U.S. economy.
They weren't doing that before. They were just doing everything totally in secret and were offering no explanations, and no one asked for them. And so there is a lot more suspicion now, and the Fed does have to run a lot more PR than it used to.
End the Fed! End the Fed!
How could it be ended?
Take away their power to buy assets. And that's probably been the number one fuel behind inflation over the last 20 years. Is you got the Fed buying up mortgage-backed securities, they're buying up government treasuries, they're essentially functioning as this huge corporatist institution that helps benefit billionaires and government agents at the expense of normal people who hold dollars. And so just stop that. Stop the central bank's ability to manipulate interest rates by buying up assets. And that would go a long way toward minimizing the damage. You can still have if you want to say that, hey, we still need the Fed in case it runs on the banks and all of that sort of stuff. Hey, heck, I'll meet you in the middle for the time being. And we'll say, go ahead, you can have a Fed for that. But the number one thing that needs to be done is just take away the Fed's ability to buy up assets.
Yet you've got all these brilliant economists all over the country who say, no, the Fed is helpful.
I know of no better supervision and regulatory operation than exists within the total Federal Reserve System.
You're such a minority.
You have good economics and you have economics that isn't quite right.
They're all dumb. They're all just wrong.
They are wrong. If they hadn't have been wrong, we wouldn't have had the Great Depression. If they hadn't been wrong, we wouldn't have had the inflation of the 1970s. These things happened because of bad economic policy, and bad economic policy came out of bad economic theory. And the U.S. is still in the thrall of that.
As the issuer of the currency, the federal government can never run out of money.
The Fed has a lot of influence within academic economics departments, does a lot of funding of its own, of research. That sort of thing has an effect. And that's not nothing. And so you ask, well, all these economists are in agreement that gold is bad and that inflation is good. If they had such a rock-solid case, we wouldn't be looking now at so many economic problems that we have faced over the last 20 years.
If it's so clear and obviously right, why is your side losing the debate?
There's a big advantage that the people who are in favor of inflation and more government regulation have. It's that everyone in government wants that same thing. So when you have a school of thought that said, hey, government, you like to inflate the money supply? Hey, government, you like to spend? You like to regulate the economy? Boy, have we got an economic theory for you. And so they, of course, became instantly popular with people in government, with the government-funded university.
And with the public.
Well, because the public want the government to spend on them as well. And here was an economic theory telling them the government can give you boatloads of welfare nonstop forever, and there's no downside. It was telling everybody what they wanted to hear and still tells everybody what they want to hear. Government, you can spend more. Regular people on the street, you can get more welfare-free stuff. The reality is that there's a downside to all of that. That downside is recessions. The downside is unemployment. The downside is inflation and falling real wages. But then you have to explain that, and people aren't interested. All they want to hear, they just want to get to the end, where the Keynesians tell them more welfare, more spending, more free money. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing it.
An enormous stimulus is a wonderful thing for our businessmen and our manufacturers and our unemployed.
Keynes was popular, but Hayek was right.
Whether it's the late 20s or 2005, booming bad investments seems like they'd thrive. You must save to invest, don't use the printing press, or a bus will surely follow, an economy depressed.
Mises, Hayek, they died years ago. This is old stuff. It's irrelevant.
Well, the economy hasn't fundamentally changed at all in that time. Private property is private property. It doesn't matter in what period you are. Also, business cycles haven't changed at all in that time. We're on the same boom-bust cycle due to the same economic phenomena today that we were back then. Comparing 1910 to 2025, it's just the same phenomena, and the same explanations are valid today as they were back then.
Your so-called stimulus will make things worse. Just more of the same, more incentives perverse. And that credit crunch ain't a liquidity trap, just a broke banking system. I'm done, that's a wrap.
Hayek and Mises led me to question what I thought I knew about economics and government policy. Their books are well worth reading today. Thanks for listening. New episodes drop the first Monday of every month. You can subscribe wherever you get podcasts.